Hi everybody, it's Shaylee again. We are getting ready to start our second block for our Quilt Along for a Cause 2020. This is the owl from the Stars of the Forest pattern. Before we get going, I just wanted to point out, I go ahead and save a little bit of paper. These are the only 2 pages besides the actual pattern that I print. If you prefer to not have to color your own, you could print out the pre-colored planning guide. And then you'll want the actual directions, or at least most people will. You'll want the actual directions with the list of the order you need to assemble things. The reason I skip everything else is it's basically the same, and I'm a big proponent of saving ink, paper, and time. As you can see, I already have all of my sections pieced. They are ready to be assembled now. You'll want to have your planning guide or blank coloring page within view because you will be able to turn your pattern over and make sure that it matches exactly. This will also help you determine where exactly you should stick your straight pins when you're joining section to section so that you get the most clean and crisp look. But we'll go ahead and go through that real quick. First up on our assembly sheet is putting A to B. So we'll take the rest of the sections and set them out of the way. I like to use glue for basting. You'll need some straight pins. Make sure if you're going to do exactly what I'm doing that your straight pins are heat resistant. So we'll set those off to the side. Take your sections, and as you can see here and here, since I have 2 brown edges that are going to come together, that's the only part that I need to be absolutely certain is straight pinned exactly into place, as well as the corners. If right here gets a little bit off, it's not a big deal. The pattern will kind of accommodate for that. However, if it ends up being pinned together like this, it's going to be very obvious that it's mismatched. So as you can see, it's stabbed through on the brown on this side and goes into the brown on the other side. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the corners. I will add glue. You could do just dots at where your pens are. That should be enough to keep it from wiggling. I tend to just go ahead and add a little bit of glue the entire length of the seam, but you don't have to. The number of places that you would pin should be enough if you glue just where the pins are. Sometimes I get a little rough with my seam though, so I glue a little extra. Once I've sewn it, I will lay it flat, iron it flat, and it doesn't really matter which way you lay your seams. I personally tend to look and see whichever side is going to be the least bulky, or if I've got a lighter fabric like this white, I would try and lay the seam away from the white just so that it looks nice and clean once the paper is removed. Some of the lighter fabrics are sometimes a little see-through. So I'll give it a quick press. As you can see, your brain's natural response is to turn it sideways and make it match so that it's still the same as what you originally were looking at. But remember, this is reversed. So what we've been working on was actually going to be on the right side of the owl. So we'll flip it back over. We've got A to B already done. Next up, we need to take AB to C. So we've got C right here. Same process. The only spot we need to be super sure about pinning besides the corners is right here at the top of his head. If you miss the top of his head, it's going to look really funny. So if you're really worried that you're not going to get it quite right, use the pins. You could use a basting stitch and test it, and then go back through and use smaller stitching Basting stitch is a lot easier to rip out if you have that problem. All right, now I will unfold and gently press this seam. If you get a little excessive with the glue and it's seeped past your 1/4 inch seam, gently tug that open or use a little bit of water and loosen the glue up a little bit. So there we go. We've got section A, B, and C. And now the directions say we need to put this aside and put section D and E together. So here's E and here's D. Again, we've got right underneath the ear of the owl, there is one spot that needs to be pinned very carefully. Now we've sewn section D to E. Open it up, give it a little heat. And we are ready to assemble the rest of his face. So what we are sewing is section A, B, C to D, E. With this one, you'll want to make sure that the top of his head is again aligned just right. Otherwise, you might end up with something that looks a little bit like that. So now we have section A, B, C, D, and E. And the only thing we have left to do is pin it to section F. So when you're doing this, you'll want to make sure you check back in here. I don't always do this, so if you're looking at some of my older patterns, sometimes the numbers are upside down. So you'll want to just double check yourself and make sure, for example, on this one, F8 and F3 should be facing towards the rest of the pattern. It would be pretty easy to accidentally put it on like this. And although I don't think it would look bad, you would just be very frustrated trying to line up these seams because they're not going to match. So make sure you've got it facing the right direction. Like this. So F8 and F3 are going to be matched to A10 and G13, and you'll want to stick a pin right here on the brown on both of these. If I had taken the white up onto the other sections, you would have another section to be worried about, but I tried to make this quilt as simple as possible so those of you who were maybe new and learning could manage it without feeling overwhelmed. So I like to start with my pinning on the left and then go to the right and then go to the corners. And as you can see, sometimes you accidentally drop the other side. If you have problems where it starts to separate, you can take a clip. Sometimes that's helpful to clip it. You don't drop the left side while you're working on the right side. Usually once I've done it once, I realize I've been doing it and I stop, but instead today I've done it several times. So as you can see, I keep accidentally dropping this one and it's coming undone. And so my perfect alignment is no longer there. And so what I do when I'm working with really big patterns, and that happens, I'll grab some of these Clover Wonder Clips and I'll just stick one on right there. And I've seen people who paper piece, and that's what they do anyway. They don't glue baste, they just take clips like this and clip them along the edges. I think that works for really square patterns. I think when it comes to things that are more angular, you're gonna run into more problems if you do just that and you don't stick a straight pin through to find the exact seam line. And then I can stick one there, and that holds it together while I finish finding the rest of the seams. I will take those off before I glue baste. Now I'll go ahead and remove the Clover Wonder Clips. And you could use a clothespin, you could stick a pin just through the entire thing. Whatever it is that helps you not lose where you've pinned already is very handy when it comes to large pieces like this. The other thing I will sometimes do if I keep losing where I've pinned is I will pin half, glue based, and then pin the other half. Whatever is easiest or most handy for me at the time is usually what I lean towards. Okay, now we'll give it a quick glue baste. And there you go. I have to decide whether or not I want the nose to be a little bit bulkier or for this seam to be behind the white. And my white is a little bit thin on this particular pattern. I think it'll be okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and iron that way. If you're using a white that's not very see-through or your color is fine, I would definitely iron the seam the other direction. And there you have it. This is our owl for week 2, Stars of the Forest Quilt Along for a Cause 2020.